You're starting already. Well, we're live. You're right. It's the old phone, Joe. Doot doot doo
Do
doo.
do do.
Oh God, Joe Choppy, you almost made me say the old intro.
Bio-
Yeah, no,
yeah,
no, no. Let's not even go down that particular road. Welcome to the Joe and Joe Weather Show tonight on this Thursday night, the 2nd of January. My God, the year just started and it's rolling right along already.
it's almost as if it only started yesterday, it seems, right? And here we
Yes.
are, day two. And I have to tell you, Joe, I did my own YouTube show about 2 hours ago, and I don't know who's spreading the rumor out there, but there are people out there who think that we're going to get blasted with snow Saturday night into early Sunday. I mean, I'm not talking about just a coating or a little bit of snow. I'm talking about getting blasted big, and then another big time round of the white stuff for next week around Tuesday or Wednesday. So,
I,
like
I,
I said,
I, I'm
I
going.
don't know how it's all getting started, but
I'm
we're
going
here
to
tonight.
tell you my opinions on all of this. First
Yeah.
of all, obviously, no for Saturday night into Sunday. In fact, I was, I've been so unbullish with regards to Saturday night into Sunday morning for days. I'm still that way, other than maybe the cheapest of cheap thrills. Now, it might be different going north up into upstate New York and going in toward I-90 and those places, okay? Because we have our folks that watch from there too, so it'll be a different world, slightly different world there. Yeah, but there was some just really stupid stuff that was going around, and I know where it came from, uh, and why it came from. Yeah, the other thing about Tuesday is it has no model support except for the GFS, and even there, it has dwindled considerably, and it was never really much on the table to begin with. I think the one that probably needs to be watched might be next weekend, because that might play out where in a pattern like this where you have uh, the only way you're going to wind up with any snow is if you time everything out perfectly. A shot of cold air and a weather system going by at the same time. That is a difficult thing to accomplish even in the best of patterns. So that's really the only way it's going to happen. I think there's a shot maybe next weekend. And I said this before I even looked at the 18Z GFS, which has now put the kiss of death on it to a certain extent. But no matter. But here's what everybody was looking at this morning, and I'm going to bring up pivotalweather.com, which is the source for the map. They didn't create the issue. The European model did. And what everybody looked at, and the Europeans been kind of going back and forth on this, but people woke up to this, okay, from the overnight run last night on the European. This is the from pivotalweather.com. This is the European's snow map. So if you want to look at some numbers, it gave uh, 6 or more inches across Long Island. The first thing I woke up to today was a tweet from somebody who's got to be the big. I don't know who the person is. I don't know him personally, uh, but he's got to be the biggest snow weenie on earth. So he was already proclaiming a 4 to 6 inch plowable snow for Long Island for this weekend. And I was like, where did that come from? Well, that is the European snow map from the overnight run. And it had a low and cold, it's marginal cold air at best. And I think one of the immediate issues to me was, Joe, that there was, when you looked at the actual surface map in terms of the precip type, there was a lot of sleet in here. So that already to me would, if you wanted to even be bullish, you needed to cut it in half. Now let's look, I'm going to bring up the day run, okay?
Okay.
And here's the day run. Okay, barely a fraction of an inch, and not just here, but clear up the Hudson Valley, barely a
Yeah.
fraction of an inch, and maybe a few inches up around the lakes. How much of that winds up being lake effect, who knows? But this is not forecasting, folks. It really isn't. This is not forecasting to be able to go from one model run to another. Uh, when you're seeing these jumps back and forth, you're not really looking at what's actually going on. And what's actually going on is yeah, you've got a low that's going to develop a primary that's going to move probably across southern Pennsylvania, move off the New Jersey coast. But guess what? There's no high to the north. There's no cold air. There
We said
really
that last
isn't.
night. We,
And you know what? Here we are 24 hours later, and there still isn't any cold air to speak of. It's ridiculous. But this is what folks do when they model jump, and it's really there were people putting out nonsense about numbers in feet. Where is this coming from? I, I
you know,
shake I shake my head. See, I'm
I,
shaking it.
I
It's
say to people, with the advent of technology and social media, it's a godsend, but it's also, and this is an example of that you get people who are not very experienced or not trained in this, and they arbitrarily just take one particular model on one particular run, and then they immediately go and then they spread it all over the place. Uh, Really, it didn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. And on my show a couple of hours ago, I had said that maybe at least in the Lower Hudson Valley, that there could be a coating to maybe an inch if everything were to fall into place correctly. And I said I even might have gone, you know, beyond that, or for much greater amounts than what may actually occur.
but
But I don't
it's
get it. And the people are screaming like that. How about Sunday? How about Wednesday? It boggles the mind.
it's when you're talking about a coating to an inch, Joe. It's almost not worth the effort. Seriously.
Well, I said that to appease some of the people. I said, well, all right, maybe we'll see. There's still a few more days to go. Something may happen, but if you're expecting anything in terms of a massive, major, or even a very significant snowfall, it really isn't going to happen either Saturday night, Sunday morning, or I think next week. A lot of people were talking about Wednesday. Oh, Wednesday's going to be the day, right? Wednesday. I said it doesn't even look like Wednesday. If we get anything next week, it might be Tuesday night for a short while. I really didn't see much of anything happening specifically on Wednesday of next week. I don't know how you feel about
No,
that.
I don't either. I mean, maybe there'll be just a little, it looks like a weak system at best. And there's a cold air issue. I mean, there's a little bit of cold air, but it's nothing to write home about. I don't know that there's much room for anything to happen. You can't have it both ways. You can't have a low that's going to be developing here Saturday night to Sunday just offshore and possibly strengthening as it moves eastward and slowly getting out of the way, and at the same time have another strong system come in behind it. There's only so much room to produce back to back lows that can have some impact, and I just don't really see it. I'm
I
not
don't.
seeing it.
I didn't see it either. But and in fact, I said yesterday, if you remember, I said if there's anything to be particular about on Sunday, it's going to be the wind. The
Right.
wind will probably sustain speeds, I would say, around 20, with some gusts, stronger gusts to 30 or 40, creating wind chills in the 20s. So that's going to be the story, I think, on Sunday.
John Curry says if you have a deep low, you don't need a high. That's true. That is quite true, John. If you do have a really strong intensifying low, you can put down a heavy snowfall and a major snowfall. Well, I have often referred to it as do-it-yourself cold air, where the atmosphere cools from the top down. I just don't believe that with the system on Saturday, even though it may wind up eventually strengthening as it moves out, the upper features are okay, but they're not anything to scream home about in terms of intensity. So that's why I'm kind of arguing against it from the standpoint of the system for Saturday. And then when you look up, I mean, there, like as I said, the aloft is cold enough, but the bottom part of the atmosphere is not going to be, and it may take a while for that to correct, even if you did get the heavy precip. So it's kind of a delicate balance. I just don't think it's there at least from what I'm seeing now. I just don't think it's there.
And the weather, in a word, beginning after midnight tonight and running all the way through tomorrow and into Saturday, I guess, in a word, indifferent, because we're not going to get anything particularly heavy. And it would appear right now that the temperatures aren't going to change all that much from later tomorrow through tomorrow night and on into Saturday, something like upper 30s and low to mid 40s, and just light rain, spotty light rain at times, a little bit of drizzle, maybe a patch or two of fog, but it's nothing that is nothing to write home about. It's just
Yeah.
going to be kind of a dreary, dull, dank weather pattern.
Well, let me. I'm going to bring up. I wrote a piece late this afternoon, and the Patreon members have it, and actually my app users have it right now. It's I haven't written a, I didn't hadn't written a Joe Stradamus long range piece for a while because of the Christmas holidays and everything else. It just kind of and not too much was going on, so I just sort of laid back. But there were a couple of things that I came up with today. So let me bring these up really fast. I have the world's when it comes to hats and earbuds, I can't wear them. The earbuds, I can never get them to stay in my ear, no matter what. It's so frustrating. Um, and hats, that's another thing that I do not do well is hats. All right, so I'm just opening up a few images here. No, why did it do that?
Ah, technology, Joseph.
Yeah, I know. Okay, I think I got them all opened up now. One, two. Let me put that at the end. I'm also having issues with Optimum. Something happened yesterday where they uh, remember I told you yesterday that my system went down about 1:30 in the
Yes,
afternoon.
yeah.
Okay, so well, it was down for about 3 hours, and last night I was having a really difficult time getting the live stream set up. I couldn't. I wasn't. The stream would not connect, and I thought it was you. You know, first I thought maybe it was YouTube, but as I discovered later today, because I spoke with somebody else, I started having problems. I was posting a piece on my Patreon platform, and I was trying to upload stuff, and it just wasn't going. Well, I talked to somebody else on a completely different issue, a completely different uh, situation with regards to this, and lo and behold, I don't know what happened at 1:30, but it seems to have messed up their system to where you can't stream very well. So I'm actually using a Verizon hotspot at the moment. Uh, which is getting our show on the air. So let's go to this long range stuff. So I want to just uh, fool around with this. I was looking at the teleconnections and a few other things today, and we often talk about when we talk about these teleconnections, the Pacific North America Index and so on. Well, what does that mean? A lot of folks say, okay, well, what does that mean? Well, here we have this is from today. Again, these are snapshot pictures of the surface, and you're looking at pressure patterns. You're subtracting and adding pressures over different geographic areas, and you're coming up with a number. And this tells you whether pressures are running above or below normal in a certain particular geographic area. And the three that we pay attention to are the Pacific North America Index, which covers the west, the southeast coast of the United States, and a good chunk of the tropical and subtropical Pacific. You've got the North Atlantic Oscillation, or the NAO, which concentrates on the North Atlantic, north of the Azores, south of Greenland. And then you've got the East Pacific Oscillation, which concentrates on an area in the Gulf of Alaska, and also takes into account pressure changes down in and around Hawaii to Baja California. And what we're seeing here is that Pacific North America Index is going off the wall negative. Now, a couple of things about that. When these indices go off the wall, it renders weather models, it puts them in a very difficult way. They don't seem to handle it very well when the atmosphere gets stretched out to extreme measures. And this is what we're seeing here. And I think this is part of the reason why you're seeing so much volatility in the models. This is over for the next 2 weeks, by the way. There's no blocking. The NAO is positive, so everything's going to be moving along from west to east. The only glimmer of hope for snow lovers is that the East Pacific Oscillation, which is positive right now, does go neutral around January 10th, and then it goes negative after that. And that might help to bring in some shots of cold air across the U.S. And that's what I was getting at earlier when I was saying that in order for us to really get anything with regards to snow and cold, you're going to have to get these things to time out. And here's just bringing up the GFS. You've got this is what it looks like with the negative PNA. You've got the deep trough out in the west, the positive NAO. You can see there's a flow going west to east across the North Atlantic, which moves weather systems along. And then you've got that big upper high between Alaska and Hawaii that's building up toward Alaska, and that is playing into a developing East Pacific negative EPO. The thing is, this is day 11. You jump to day 16. I'm going to go back to day 11, and you go to 16, and you notice that it really doesn't change very much. The only subtle change is that there is a bit more of a flow from Canada, from northwest Canada into southeast Canada and into New England. So that might allow for some colder air to come in. But if the NAO is positive, then cold air comes in and then it goes out. And the other thing I just want to leave you with is when I looked at the new CFS climate model, after around the 20th of January, you'll notice on this loop that it goes from what we have right now and set up for the next 2 weeks. It completely reverses, and you've got a trough in the east and the ridge in the west, and you also have troughing down south of Hawaii. So this would support a flip to colder weather late in the month of January and going into February. But I would just caution, to wrap this part up in terms of the long range, I would just caution that this model is not the most reliable model in the world. Not that any of them are, it seems, but it did this for January, for the whole month, showing colder for the whole month, and we're now seeing how where that got you. So just bear that in mind. Take it with a grain of salt.
And I just took a look, Joe, at the Climate Prediction Center. We said yesterday that they were kind of indicating a blowtorch type weather pattern after about the 9th of the month. And on today's particular scheme of things for the 10th through the 16th, that's the 8 to 14 day forecast. You talk about blowtorch for the middle Atlantic down through the southeast, 80% probability of above normal. And in our area now, somewhere between 70 and 80% probability. So if what the guys over at the and gals over at the CPC are thinking, it really is going to warm up quite significantly once we get past, let's say, the end of next week.
Mm-hmm.
And whether or not this will continue or carry over right on through the rest of the month. And by the way, tomorrow night they'll have the updated 3 to 4 week probabilities for temperatures and precipitation. But if you're into winter weather, these long range projections don't look all that great. We may very well, as you just alluded to, we may very well have to wait until the end of this month or the beginning of February before we have a shot at another good surge of colder air and possible snow here.
Well, certainly from what we just showed, that would kind of time out that way. The pattern holds firm for the next couple of weeks, and then you get a change toward the end of the month and going into the month of February. Again, does it mean it can't snow and it doesn't get cold in that stretch? No, it does from time to time, but the cold is muted. It moves in and out quick, and if you want snow out of it, you're going to have to time it out just right. Hey, while we're on the subject, because Scott Briller brought this up to me the other day, this was a stat that you and I have talked about a few times. So, December was very wet, and when you look back, he pulled up some stats, and he looked back at 9 out of the 10 winters where you had above normal, rainfall, total liquid precip,
Right.
but
Right.
like way above normal. First of all, they've all occurred after 1970. Okay, which is
I remember we were talking about this. Yeah.
right. 9 of the top 10 wettest have all been, all after nine. Actually, all 10 have been after 1970. Uh, Wettest winters. 9 out of 10 of those winters finished with below normal snowfall. And when you think about it, it makes sense because if you're producing a whole lot of precip, it's probably because of the fact that you're warmer and the atmosphere is holding more water and letting it go.
Right.
Could be the reason why we're seeing more convective activity too. That's another thing that struck me strange. To see as much thunderstorm. The only times I could remember thunderstorms playing out during the winter months when we have El Ninos and La Ninas roaring, but we don't have either one. That's the mystery here to me. There's no, we're in neutral for the ENSO, right? The ENSO. We're neutral. So there's no La Nina, there's no El Nino, although some people are proclaiming otherwise. The Weather Service says there's nothing, so we're just going to go with them. So
La Nana.
La Nada. So where is this all coming from that we have this upper air pattern that resembles more of a La Nina or an El Nino type year? I'm not sure. Or is it just a coincidence?
Can't say. I'm still trying to figure out why we did have thunderstorms a few days ago in the first place. If you remember, the juicy air, the balmy juicy air was over central and south Jersey. That's where the Storm Prediction Center was targeting possibly some enhanced or more than just a few regular thunderstorms. And what happened? We ended up seeing severe weather, not in the balmy sector, but in the cold
Yeah,
sector.
that was just bizarre. It just really
Yeah.
was. Um, I mean, I read around and a couple of people explained why it happened, but which I guess made sense. But I mean, looking at it going in the day before, you never would have guessed that it would have been up there. Garo
Right.
Vestas wants to know if we plan on talking about the Saturday Sunday snowstorm totals. Hey, Garo,
Summer,
you must have tuned
it's
in late because we already played that card at the beginning of the show tonight, and it ain't going to happen. So just leave
yeah,
it there. Here,
yeah.
here's the thing, Joe. If we were pending a
And
snowstorm, okay, if we were pending any kind of snowfall of size, it would require it's Thursday night, correct? It's Thursday night.
right,
So
right.
onset of precip would be within 36 hours or so because we're talking about Saturday. You probably would see some preemptive winter weather advisories or winter storm watches up. Would you not think so? Would you?
I yeah, I
Okay.
agree.
Okay. So hang on a second. Hang on one second. Darn these earbuds. They're falling out of my ear. I may have to just get a regular pair of headsets here because this is really annoying. But take a look at this. So if we were having an impending, here are the Weather Service watches and warnings, folks, for the Northeast. Okay, that's a lot of blue and purple and fuchsia. Yeah, they're all up there, aren't they, Joe?
Well,
All those
you're running
watches, all those watches and warnings are all flying now, aren't they?
you're running about a minute behind. I'm yet to see what you just brought up, but my
Oh, it's
belief is you're
weather.gov,
bringing
the
up
headline
a
page.
map that's barren in any kind of color.
Yes. Well, yeah, there's flash flood
There it
watches
is.
up from Tennessee down into northern Alabama and Mississippi. And I
Yeah.
think just a little while ago there were some flash flood warnings up in a few places, but looks like they took those down. Oh, I see a winter weather advisory and a winter storm watch up for northwest Montana. Groundbreaking. And also up for northwestern Colorado. Also groundbreaking.
If you look at the whole United States, I mean, for the early part of January, this is pretty good. Aside from that swath of green indicating the flooding in the Tennessee River Valley, this is a rather quiet weather map overall.
Oh, it's silent.
It's
It's darn
it's good.
silent.
Yeah. Wish it could stay this way all through the winter, right? And all the winter weather people out there who want snow and stormy weather saying, "What are you talking about, Joe Rayo?" and and you and I were probably the 30 or 40 years ago, we were, very big on dynamic weather and snow and storms and whatever, but we've kind of mellowed
That's
over the
because that's
years.
because you and I don't, once we started having to actually do it for a living and driving in it, right?
Right. Right.
especially the driving in it part. That was always problematic. So, uh, look, folks, let's put it up. We'll put it to bed as far as Saturday is concerned. Let me bring up the last run of the Nam, because I think the Nam probably has the idea here, um, with respect to how this is all going to play. So I'm loading it up. These darn earbuds.
I can remember looking at old kinescopes of the old Arthur Godfrey TV show, and he used to wear headphones initially when
Yeah,
he
no,
was sitting.
I got to get some headphones because this is really annoying me.
Yeah.
So here's our rain that comes up for tonight. Kind of matches pretty well with the radar into tomorrow morning, and that goes out. Now your low, that's warm air that's coming up the eastern seaboard here. So we're going to warm up tomorrow and into Saturday, and then the low comes out from the Ohio Valley, actually lower Ohio Valley, probably moves along the Pennsylvania Maryland state line, off the New Jersey coast and south of Long Island. You get some rain here on Saturday with a second surge into Saturday night, but look what's behind it. There's nothing. It's
Right.
a lot of the snow. There's snow up around the lakes and in upstate New York, but I mean, this is not something that certainly puts faith in me to want to put any snow in the forecast. I mean, maybe there's a cheap thrill at the end when you see a little bit of that precip gelling up in southern New England down to almost to Long Island on this run uh, during the early morning hours on Sunday. So it snows for what, 5 minutes and then out. Yeah, this is nonsense overall, in my view, from what I'm seeing. It's
Well, I
nonsense.
looked at I looked at the Stony Brook Le Plumes going all the way out to Sunday, and for Poughkeepsie and for White Plains, they were suggesting the numbers were suggestive of maybe an inch,
Mm-hmm.
but that would be a that'd probably be a slushy inch on cold surfaces if it did come to pass. That's why I said anywhere from a coating to an inch on Sunday, excuse me, Saturday night into early Sunday. And again, I also said it may not happen at all. We'll just have to wait and see.
And with respect to not having, with regards to whether you have cold air or not, when you look at this aloft, Joe, and you look at the trough, I mean, it's a decent look. It's a decent enough trough, but it's a positively tilted, sharpening trough that's moving east. It goes neutral when it's along the coast and then goes out. And then you can see that next trough right behind it for Monday is running from just north of Minnesota near Lake Winnipeg, southeastward. There's hardly any room for anything to work on with this. And if we jump to the GFS, same idea for Tuesday into well, GFS is the only model that seems to be doing something with this for Tuesday because it drops a decent enough trough from Minnesota down to Tennessee Tuesday afternoon, and then kind of lifts it up when it heads to the coast Tuesday night into Wednesday. But the other models are much flatter with that. The European is, it's just it's got it, but it's much flatter. It doesn't have nearly as much definition as the GFS has with it, and then it lifts on up and goodbye. And then, of course, the next thing that we're going to have to deal with, and this is where I think something could happen. Uh, you know, we're looking away. If something's going to happen, it might be next weekend because that might be where we've got that combination where we get a little bit of cold air that comes down from the north in Canada and some troughing. You can sort of see it here on the upper air. There's a vortex that wraps up in Hudson Bay. So there's actually a little bit of cold Canadian air that's moving across southern Canada, the northern lakes, and into New England. And then there's a shortwave trough in the bottom part of the jet that heads towards the mid-Atlantic coast. So it could be one of these deals where we get a cold front coming through and then a wave on it after the front goes by, like the ones we saw in early December,
Yeah.
during the first half of the month of December. So it might be something like that, and that's kind of where the GFS went with it this afternoon, which probably means that on the very next run it won't be there. But but here it is, um, where you've got this front, sort of an Arctic boundary that comes through Saturday afternoon, and then there's a wave on the southern end as the front slides southeastward, so that it changes into a narrow band of snow. You see, there's a 1032 high north of Plattsburgh. So you got low-level cold air coming down. It would have to time out perfectly. That's the only thing. Everything would have to be absolutely perfect. And if you're seeing a perfect run 9 days into the future, you know it ain't going to look like this.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly. Uh,
and longer term, I mean, there's some low-level cold air with a high to the north, but it's like duh. It's barely it barely gets into the east. Uh, yeah, I mean, until we need a wholesale change of the whole upper air pattern, and it's not going to come anytime in the next 2 weeks. That's for sure.
yeah, well, like I said, we were just saying, it might not be until either the very end of the month or maybe the beginning of February that we'll see any kind. And by then, if there's anything to the fact that cold air is so much denser than warm air, you got all that cold air sitting over the top of the world, and then the dike may eventually break, and all of that will come funneling on down in our direction. But again, that may be more than just a week or two away.
Well,
We'll have to see.
yeah, and it's going to come down to, are you going to have something that's going to be able to connect the flow from northern Canada straight down into the Great Lakes and into the eastern part of the United States? Because if you don't have that, all that cold air is just going to sit up there for until the whole polar vortex just breaks down. I got the satellite loop up so we can just watch all these. We had a whole day of sunshine today. I hope you got to enjoy it.
Well, I enjoyed the early part of the day, and well, I was doing something in the afternoon,
Yes,
so I
correct.
didn't I didn't
Yeah.
get a chance to enjoy the afternoon sun.
Well, the clouds did finally roll in, so there's actually quite a fair amount of moisture here, streaming northeastward. In fact, the radar is pretty loaded from Western Virginia, Western North and South Carolina down into Louisiana. Might be some heavy thunderstorms there. Central Mississippi down into Southwest Louisiana. I'm just going to pull up. Let's see if SPC is doing anything tonight with that. And yeah, they actually have a slight risk of severe weather for uh, the southern part of Louisiana into central Mississippi and a small portion of western Alabama for tonight. Marginal risk extends a little further north and east from there. And for the next day, so for Thursday, I'm sorry, for this is, where's the date on this darn thing? Oh, here we go. From Friday to Saturday morning, we have a marginal risk in the Florida Panhandle and Southwest Georgia, Southeast Alabama, with a chance of general thunderstorms up to southernmost Virginia. So that's the extent of, at least there are some severe weather issues definitely going on tonight with all of this. And as far as, by the way, as far as the weekend is concerned, in terms of snow, I got the snow maps up from the Weather Service. Much of the action, of course, if you've got a deep trough in the west, it's going to be in the west, and they're getting clobbered up in the mountains in northwestern Washington with some. There's an 88 print east of Seattle, and what is that? The Cascades there.
Yes.
Yeah, 88 inches in one spot, 59 inches in another, 95 in another spot. There's generally 1 to 2 inches across the northern plains and the Great Lakes down into Illinois and Indiana. Maybe the southern end of that is a coating to an inch. And as far as the Northeast is concerned, with regards to whatever happens on Saturday, you've got some 2 to 4, 3 to 5 inch amounts upstate New York, north of I-90 and east of I-81, going into Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. Another groundbreaking development that it's snowing up in New England and in upstate New York. And that's about
It's
it.
it's a funny thing, Joe. I'm watching here on YouTube, and again, I'm running about a minute behind your soliloquy here, but I'm looking at on the right hand side some of the videos that are being offered, and over here there's one particular one. It says winter storm, and it says our next major winter storm, showing a white arrow taking it from the Ohio Valley to
Tell
just
me
south.
the arrows at my house.
Yeah. I'm saying like the next major winter storm. I mean, I see nothing reflecting a major winter storm, but apparently there are some spots on the World Wide Web or on YouTube or wherever that are pushing for a major winter storm in the immediate or not so
Boy, they're
far.
really desperate for clicks, aren't they?
I guess. I
It's just
guess.
ridiculous. I mean, really, it is. It's just ridiculous. We have a new. Here's somebody new on the chat board. Don't matter who cares. He says hi to both of us. So hi back and welcome. And it does
How
matter, and we care. It's just
how is
so.
the weather for Peekskill going to be? He wants to know.
Ah,
I'm a stone's throw away from Peekskill, and I can tell you that we may get a touch of light snow Saturday night and early Sunday. Doesn't look like it's going to amount to all that much. This is what we've been jabbering about the last 20 or 25 minutes, and maybe something on Tuesday, but that doesn't look like much of anything either. So if you're if our new friend here don't matter, what is it? Don't matter who cares.
right,
If he's a snow lover, he ain't gonna like the looks of or the sound of that, won't he?
right. By the way, that we were talking earlier, the chairman's statistics with 9 out of the 10, the top 10 wettest winters are all below normal except for one. The one that wasn't was, I believe he told me it was the winter of 2003, 2004, okay, which was a snowy winter, but it was back end loaded. Uh, I'm going to let me just double check on that. I just want to
In
make
other
sure I
words,
got that stat right. Hang on one
in other
second.
words, what you're saying is that we really didn't get all of our or most of our snow until after, let's say, the middle part of February
Middle
or
part, the latter part. Well, we can add. We'll go and check first. Let me just double check that year. If it was 0203 or 0304, I thought it was 0304. Uh, oh God, this optimum thing is really ridiculous. I can't. It's selectively. I guess maybe they're trying to manage the streaming that's going on. Now I can't even get to check my messages. Oh boy. Oh, here we go. Hang on one second. Everybody, just be patient. So, do. 2003, 2004. Above
okay.
average year, 42 inches for the season, but it all was, back end loaded. So I'm going to put, this is for New York City, by the way. For New York City, we use Le Parc de Centrale when it comes to that sort of stuff. So let me just get uh, local data records, uh, Central Park. Now to snow,
You
monthly and
said 2000.
annual. What's
You
that?
said 2003, 2004.
3, 4, yeah.
I don't know, Joe. December 19.8 inches at Central Park in 2003.
Oh well, it's above normal for the whole winter. So maybe I was wrong to characterize it. Well, actually, no, Joe. Look, it was actually more front end loaded. Look at this:
Right.
19.8, 17.3,
17.3.
and then only 5 inches in February and March. So it was
Right.
actually front end loaded.
Yeah, it was one of those wild and woolly. Let's get off with a bang winter. And interestingly, the winter before 2002, 2003, 11 inches in December. That 11 inches, most of that came with that storm that we had on Christmas Day in 2002. That was my first
Yes,
Christmas up here in Putnam Valley. Got a chance to break in my then brand new snowblower.
yeah. But then, of
4
course, you could have a wonderful winter like 2002, 2001, 2002. Trace 3.5, trace, and trace.
right.
Boy, think about it, Joe. It's January, got 3.5 inches, and you didn't have any measurable snow for the rest of the winter.
It's amazing. Well, at
You
least the
know,
Central Park
right?
did.
That was a trace in December, 3.5 in January, then trace, and trace. So that was the second least snowiest on record. Because if you go to 72, 73, it
They
was
had
a whopping
2.8.
2.8.
Yeah.
But you know
Yeah.
what, folks? For you snow weenies out there, uh, this page is something you should pay attention to. Take a look at and look at those years. I'll put it up on the chat right now. But if you look at those 3 decades, 1970 to 2000, okay, which coincides, by the way, when we suddenly started getting all this extra rain, and then the rainfall amounts went up, and we've had the wettest years have all come after 1970. But look at those first 30 years, and you look at the snow amounts that fell in those decades, and they were, they were just minuscule.
I'm just putting up that page. I just put it up on the board here for everybody to see it. I think I did. Yeah, there they go. Snowfall in Central Park.
Yeah, those numbers are, they're telling of the last 2 decades and the three before that, how much things have changed in this 50-year stretch.
By the way, Ruthless Goat just called you out. You said you used the term snow weenie.
Yeah. And thank Ruthless Goat also hit super chat tonight. Uh, thanks. He said, I just lost it. Where did he say? Where is it? He said Josie is annoyed. Send him money now. Well, thank you.
Latex
Appreciate.
streams. I'm not nodding off. I'm just looking down and typing here for you. It's a little, I guess.
Pamela Gasper, I will be running to Walmart after the show is over and getting some headsets because I cannot stand these earbuds. They're driving me crazy. I have my head itself is I can't wear a standard hat. I wanted a Giants cap, and I had to go to Lids to get an oversized one because none of the standard sizes, even the biggest size, was too small for my head. So I had to special order a size 8 to get it on there. And the same with my ears. My ears are shaped in such a way that the earbuds don't stick. But I will be definitely going out to get myself a pair of headsets when we're done.
I'm trying to picture you, Joe. I'm looking at you right now. I'm trying to picture you with a fedora. you know, like
Why?
like like with well, like the men
Yeah, I'm
back in
not good. I was never one for hats. I can't wear caps because they give me even the cap that I have, the Giants cap that I have, which is big enough. It gives me a headache after a while. I don't know how people can wear them all day long. I can't.
yeah yeah, but back in the 50s and 60s, though, I mean, especially the 50s, it was very popular for men to wear some kind of a hat.
Oh yeah, you go back, before JFK when everybody wore hats.
Right.
You know, I mean, my grandfather wore a suit to tend to the garden to plant the tomatoes.
JFK was the first president to not wear a top hat
Right.
at inauguration, and then they all followed suit after that, I guess. So
Yeah, Robert Brown says it's all that weather knowledge inflated in my head. I got news for you, Robert. If that's the case, it's been deflating pretty quickly lately in terms of what I can remember and what I have remembered. Oh Lord. So that really is it, Joe. There's not too much else to talk about really tonight. It's pretty quiet. There's not a whole lot happening at the moment. There's not really a whole lot to look ahead to going into the weekend, other than what we said. And as far as the pattern for the next couple of weeks, um, I'm going to stand by. If we're going to see anything, it'll be late next week and next weekend when maybe something times out. Nicely. And welcome to Anthony Antonucci, who is new to the board. So a big hello to you and welcome to the chat board tonight. Nice to have you on.
oh, Joe, I agree with you. There's not much really to talk about, and we may not have much to talk about after the middle or latter part of this month, with the potential of some rather balmy weather settling in over the
Right.
central and eastern United States.
We're going to have to wait for that deep trough. Look, all weather patterns break down eventually. It would be really unusual for it to hold. If it holds through the middle of January, it would have been, 4 weeks. And, most patterns run like 4 to 6 weeks or so before they break. Every once in a while, you get one that, really hangs on tight. And by the way, if you look through the records, you don't have to look that hard. There are a few winters, for example, 66, 67, where there was only 11. There was a 9.1 in December, 1.4 inches in January, and then 40 inches in February and March. So, they could certainly go to a back end loaded winter. One thing you notice when you go through these numbers, Joe, there are very few winters where you get big numbers every single month. There's always usually one or two of the months in the winter season that finish normal or below normal, unless it's a really gangbusters year. Um, I'm looking back to, I'm just going way back uh, now. I'm looking at the 1880s because that was a snowy decade. But of course, this past decade even took that one out. But even here, it's funny because in that decade, Decembers were very busy. Januaries were mostly busy, and Februaries also mostly busy. Marches were not, except for the blizzard of '88, and then also in 18 March of 1990 there was 17 inches for the month at the park. The rest of them are all generally several inches or less. But back end loaded winters do happen. So it is not to say that the pattern can't flip to something that is more favorable going into the end of January, February, and for February and into March. We'll just have to see.
Well, I remember that winter of 66, 67. That, in fact, February 7th of that year, we had a blizzard. We had 12 and a half inches of snow in New York City. And you're right. And March of that year, 67, there were, I think, two or three snowstorms that occurred within a few days of St. Patrick's Day and the first day of spring. Um, and it's you're right. You can get a backloaded winter in terms of snowfall, and who's to say that we couldn't do it this time around if we don't end up with much of snow this month?
Yeah. So you know what? The pattern is what it is. Nobody truly knows where it's going to go. They can only look at what's going on and make the best guess that they can. And a lot of times uh, you get thrown a curveball
Or a knuckleball?
or a knuckleball.
Yeah.
And, when you least expect it, something might pop up. But right now, from what I've been seeing, I've been looking at the Ensemble 500 day in and day out. It just stays the same out in the West. It just doesn't change. That deep trough is out there, which Ruthless Goat might be happy because that'll give him some chances for snow in Colorado.
Well, you never know when you're going to end up with a what I call a Gomer pile. And on more than one occasion in my storied career in forecasting, I've gone on the air and said something like, "Oh, don't worry about it. We're just going to have a coating to maybe an inch," and you wake up the next morning and there's like 4 inches instead of a coating, and that's when Jim Neighbors' voice rolls through my mind. Surprise! Surprise!
Surprise, surprise.
Surprise!
Hey, here's an interesting question. John Curry says, "Do you think that we should censor the internet for fake weather reports?"
Well, you
First
mean
of all, how do you define that? From
well, I
this,
mean, if for example, one particular person decides to call for, let's say, 4 to 8 inches of snow, let's say for something that may be happening this weekend,
Mhm.
that would be a fake weather report, I guess, right? Unless
But you
it
don't know it's fake until after. I mean, look,
you don't know if it's going to be fake until
here's a
after.
right. There isn't a credible forecaster out there that is going to put out a 4 to 8 inch snowfall forecast based on what they're seeing today, in my never to be humble opinion. If you want to put a forecast out of 4 to 8 or 8 to 12 or whatever it is you're going for, God bless you, go for it. You do whatever you want. It doesn't matter to me, but I know what I would do and what I wouldn't do, and that's what I would not do. I just don't know. How do you define um, how would you define fake and credible when you get a situation where, let's say, if it's a snow changing to rain situation, you think the rain snow line is going to cut across Long Island. Somebody else might think that the rain snow line won't be an issue, that it'll be offshore. A third person thinks the rain snow line gets all the way up to, say, 287 or Route 84. So you're obviously going to get a range of forecasts from anywhere from a coating to an inch from one person to maybe up to a foot for another. So who's to say, who's to say what's fake here? Because that all three forecasts might have plausibility depending on your point of view. But what I would say is people should definitely at least be discerning enough to know that the folks that call over and over again for burials that never happen, after a
Mhm.
while, you're going to sit there and say, you know what? I'm thinking this person really doesn't know too much about what he's talking about, so maybe I should go find somebody else to get my weather info from. That's all I would say.
I know that
Um,
there was a few occasions where, everybody's talking about a major storm potential, and somebody will go on the internet and say, "Hey, it really does look like it's going to happen. Even Rayo is going for a major
yeah,
snowstorm." I've gotten a reputation over the years of being a very conservative forecaster when it comes to snow, and I guess I don't know. I take that as a compliment. But that was one way that one person was able to say, "Hey, this looks like it's for real because even Rayo's going for it."
Scott Briller, thanks for super chat tonight. Really appreciate it. He says he also brings up 1890 is the only year in Central Park with no measurable snow in January.
Well, we haven't gotten any yet, have we?
No, not yet.
So we're still working on a no hitter.
I had a trace. Yeah,
We're
I
only
had
in the
some
second
flurries
inning.
yesterday, so I had a trace.
That's absolutely true. We did have some flurries in the air yesterday, so up here. So I don't know about Central Park. Um, if anybody at the conservatory was outside when the 4 or 5 flakes was coming down to say that it was a trace.
Yeah, and, I don't know. I'm sorry, I missed the last part of what you said, Joe. Would you say that
I
again?
said I didn't know whether or not if it happened in Central Park, if anybody at the conservatory was out at the
Yeah, because you almost had to be there for it was so, it was just a few little pieces of dust that was flying by.
right.
Um, yeah, it would. Okay, when I'm not going to call out anybody specifically, and the reason why I'm not going to do that, and never do, frankly, is I don't, and Joe could testify to his own way of doing things. At least with me, I do not read anyone else's forecast uh, at all. I might look at the Weather Service's forecast after I've done mine, and I don't change mine. It's just that it's hard to kind of avoid the Weather Service's forecast if you're using their websites to try to gather certain information that you're going to need to make yours. Normals, averages, and so on. But the thing is, with respect to what anybody else is ever doing on the internet when it comes to weather, I'm the wrong person to ask for commentary about it because I really don't look. I don't have the time. A, I don't have the time, and B, I really don't want to because I don't want to be biased by what anybody else is saying. And I've always operated that way in terms of the four. Even when Joe and I worked together, we wouldn't usually he and I would not talk until after we had our own stuff done, and there were a lot of times where he and I, would match up exactly. Then there were other times because were dealing with different geographic zones where there was some variation, and in situations where there was variability, we would discuss, and you would ultimately come to see the light. No, but I
I'm
mean,
getting in the car right now and traveling to your house to give you a punch in the face.
yes. No, but you go ahead. You can back me up on this.
Yeah, well, but what you were talking about a few moments ago about looking at other forecasts or whatever, it reminds me of the news director at WHJJ Radio in Providence, Rhode Island, where I had to do my morning weather. He used to tape the morning weather forecast, and if there were a big storm like a snowstorm coming, I'd say, "Well, we have a chance for 1 to 3 inches," and he said, "Oh, really? Well, Copeland was Bob Copeland, who was a forecaster at a TV station up in Boston, and so." If I went for 1 to 3, say, well, Copeland said there's going to be 2 to 5, as if, what did you want me to do, John? Did you want me to change the forecast to 2 to 5 because Mr. Copeland in Boston was saying it? You know,
It was very. I remember what I used to get it the other way because, being that, when News 12 was in its first 10 years, which is when I was there with you. That was during a time where it didn't snow very much, but there was also a time where we had a lot of weird things happen on Long Island snow-wise. Okay, including that the one back in the late '80s where it snowed
Right.
in 20 miles, and I happened to be in it. And if you were inside that 20 miles, you got buried. But I would always get there were a number, and since Long Island at the time was also neglected by the Weather Service because they were still in New York City, they had no
Right.
idea of the kind of weather that we would get out here. So oftentimes my snow forecast amounts were higher, and justifiably so, compared to what was coming out from folks whose perspective was 50 miles to the west. So I would get it the other way. I would, forecast a higher amount, and someone would always say, well, so and so said, without mentioning who so and so is. So and
Right.
so said, how come you're going higher than so and so? And you know what? The first 2 or 3 times that you get that question, you're like, okay. But after the third time that you're right, you would think the questions would stop. And that's where it always bothered me. I never really verbalized it, but it always bothered me that, I'm working here. You're paying me. And this is what I'm telling you. And I'm, up until now, I seem to have, hit the ball out of the park each time or close enough to it. Why do you keep coming back and telling me someone who makes far more money than I do is doing, really? It was just like used to bother the crap out of me. It's just like, you know what? Why don't you go? At one point, I did tell somebody, you could always go hire that person and have them work here and fire me. I
Right.
don't understand that. I guess it comes from a sense of insecurity from the person you're dealing with, who's your boss, who wants to make sure that their coverage is going to match what you're saying, or maybe not match what you're saying. But it used to drive me crazy. That used to really annoy me.
Kind of like a plumber who's trying to fix the leaky pipe under your sink, and you're standing over him and telling him, could you do it that way, or are you absolutely sure that that's the right place to, put your monkey wrench on or whatever like that?
Yeah,
It's like the plumber saying, "Hey, lady, you want to come down here and do it yourself, or you want to get somebody else to do it?" uh,
yeah,
that's how you feel.
yeah. It's just it is just it's distressing. You start to you want to you're trying to maintain a certain degree of confidence because you don't want to be wrong. I certainly don't. I don't throw numbers out. When I do my forecast, and I know, and you the same. We don't throw out numbers haphazardly. We just don't. Oh, you know what? My numerologist said that 8 was a good number for me today because Gemini's in retrograde to Libra, so I'm going to forecast 8 inches. I mean, we don't do stuff like that. If we're going to forecast an amount, it's because we genuinely think that that's the amount that we're going to get,
Yeah,
and that's all there is to it.
and that is all there is to it. Joe, we've been going now for
Yeah, we're way yapping way too long. Time to
coming up
go.
on we're coming up on 2,000 hours.
Yeah,
So
and we're done with the Twilight Zone marathon.
yes, we're
Oh,
done.
actually, after we were done last night, I went upstairs. Another one of my favorite episodes is on there. The one with Anne Francis, the ninth floor, where she's a mannequin.
Oh,
Remember, she was returning something, a gift that she got for her mother,
right,
and it turns out that she was a mannequin and she had overstayed her 30 days out in the real world.
right. Wasn't she Marion Kirby and Topper?
Yes, I
Or am I?
believe so. Yes,
Yeah.
Marcia, Marcia, Marcia. Come on, Marcia, climb off it, dear. Oh
I think
boy.
we ought to close. I think we ought to close it down right now.
I think we
Uh,
should. Guess what? I just got a message from Ivan.
oh, our good friend
Yeah,
Ivan.
he's ready to record. For those of you, Ivan was our director when we worked at FiOS One News, and Ivan was um, he was very. I don't want to use the word anal because that really is not. It's a positive thing with him. He did things very meticulous, exactly the same way, and he kept you on time, and you always knew you could rely on him to make sure that you got your work done. In other words, if you needed to, in a complicated situation, he'd keep you on pace. You got to record this, you got to record that. So there's a special bond that we have, and certainly he and I had, because we work directly every single day. So I just got a kick out of him. He just sent me a message, so I'm going to message him back. So I will tell
And
him you
his
said hello.
favorite word was awesome.
Yes, correct.
Awesome.
All
Awesome.
right. So tomorrow is Friday. Are we doing anything or not?
Well, I ain't going anywhere.
Then
What the heck?
stand by for a ringy dingy at about 5 of 7.
I will be
All
here.
right, so everybody, we'll see you tomorrow night. Thanks for being here. Go to my website, by the way. Go to meteorologistjoechaffee.com. If you want to read that long range post that I wrote that we talked about earlier, it's up there, and give it a read. If you're on Patreon, it was up there earlier this afternoon, so you go ahead and read it if you haven't read it already. And we'll see you tomorrow. Good night, everybody.
Nighty night.